And welcome back, everyone, to yet another episode of Going for Two, presented by Homefield Apparel. I am your host, Matt Brown, the publisher of the Extra Points newsletter. I am joined by my colleague, Bryan Fischer. Bryan, how are we holding up? I'm starting to wear down a little bit here. How are you holding up? Okay.
I am. Well, we got basketball back for another weekend of the tournament, both tournaments. And look, we got a whole lot of action happening on the hard court. We had a whole lot of action happening away from the hard court. The news has been crazy. It has been a wild week, and I can understand why you're a little bit overwhelmed at times. I'm sure everybody is in the college athletics realm, so to speak, at this time of year. But the good news is there's a bit of a light of the tunnel. The weather is turning. The things are getting a little bit less compressed and compact in terms of the amount of things we have to deal with. But I am doing okay, and hopefully you are there as well, and there in Chicago.
Yeah. I'm excited for today's episode because while there is a very interesting NIL story that I haven't had a chance to turn into a newsletter, I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to be able to do it. So it's a good fodder for this show. We do have a chance to bring on some of our friends to talk about some of those bigger off the court kind of issues. We wanted to bring in actually our buddies from Homefield Apparel. We have my old coworker from Vox Media, who's now the director of social media, Whitney Medworth, and we have the Homefield CEO, Connor Hitchcock, on here too to talk a little bit, not just about shilling for T-shirts, although they are going to shill for T-shirts, and I'm going to shill for T-shirts on their behalf. That is how sponsorship arrangements work. But I also want to talk a little bit about the licensing world and what actually happens when a mid-major or a school that's not used to being in the limelight, like St. Peter's, is suddenly in the limelight. We talked about this before. Homefield was able to turn around a licensing agreement to sell four new St. Peter's shirts as part of their collections. I was checking into this today. St. Peter's has made, I believe, $19,000 in online merchandise sales. And not all of that's from Homefield, but for let's face it, a low major, a school that's not well resourced at all, that's big money. That might be what they might make over an entire year, and they basically pulled that in a week. And this episode hasn't even gone out yet, so we might be able to get them a couple extra bucks, shilling for the strut of destiny.
Well, they got a couple of bucks for me for that exact same shirt. I was one of those that rushed to hit buy, and I'm excited to get that T-shirt. But like Eli Manning's wearing St. Peter's gear right now, so it's like it is a wild moment for that school and that university, really, not only to get on the big stage like this, but really to perform and do well on the financial stuff and take advantage of this moment, because they do not come along often, and you got to strike while the iron is hot.
Yeah, you absolutely have to take advantage of it. $19,000 here, $19,000 there. That pays for another Dobo. That pays for another staff or for departments that need it, or for other equipment. I do want to get into the weeds a little bit about this Adidas NIL story. But first, let me go bring in our friends. Let's go turn the time over to our buddies over in Indianapolis to talk a little bit about selling some T-shirts. Friends, and more importantly than friends, deeply valued corporate sponsors and partners. We're thrilled to have both of you. I'm glad to see that you're both like awake and caffeinated and alive. Like I feel like I feel this way, and I haven't been working nearly as hard as you guys have. It's been a hell of a last couple of weeks.
First of all, thank you for that intro. Yes, the corporate sponsors always, of course, supersedes friendship. But in all seriousness, it's been a crazy few weeks here working at a collegiate apparel brand during two NCAA tournaments concurrently happening. I would say Whitney, more than anyone, who is also on this finest program with me, has been working harder than anyone in the United States the last 10 days. So I'll leave it at
that. We don't need to fact check that. I'm pretty sure that's
no.
That's definitely true.
Let's not fact check that.
I'd love to talk a little bit about a particularly, I think, cool thing that you guys did last week. It's a cool thing that I would say, even if you weren't giving us money. And that's with the St. Peter's T-shirt activation, right? Like one of the things that I think is cool about Homefield, beyond working with your Indianas and your Michigans and your other big behemoth brands is the fact that you can kind of go in the vaults and showcase a Colorado School of Mines dynamite featuring mule and some of these other smaller places. St. Peter's has the Peacocks. That's an amazing brand, but the athletic department's got like 9 people and they're all super busy right now. So can you like tell me how this whole happened very quickly? Because I don't think St. Peter's was on your radar as a must-grab brand before the tournament, unless I'm sorely mistaken.
Yeah, it's interesting. We actually had them on our radar only for one reason, and that is the Peacock mascot.
Okay.
They are the only mascot, or the only school that features a Peacock mascot in Division One. I can't for sure say all of collegiate athletics, but at least Division One.
You can't because Upper Iowa is also called the Peacocks. That's Division Two. Don't ask me why I know that. I'm a sick person, but sorry. Go on. I was so excited to share that with somebody.
You know,
only Division One Peacocks.
If there was a podcast host to know that, it would be you. So we've had them on the radar for a while, just because beyond, looking at sports performance, we also just look at like schools that'll have interesting, unique mascots. And then when we did a shirt for Auburn that featured a peacock a couple months ago, with that, there's a whole thing around their men's basketball team with peacocks for whatever reason. We got a ton of requests for St. Peter's saying, release a real peacock school. So we weren't planning for them. We were not licensed for them. We saw them, we have a content meeting every Monday, our team. So Whitney is in there. I'm in there. About 10 other people, whether it's email, social media, design, especially, to just talk about upcoming athletics events. And, we just kept seeing the updated tournament brackets. But St. Peter's wasn't even in it before everything because they had to win their conference tournament on the men's side. So we saw they were 15 seed, and frankly, we were like, well, we don't want to go through the process of designing a bunch of stuff right now because they're going to lose to Kentucky in our minds. And then they beat Kentucky, and then I was at a friend's house watching tournament games Saturday night with my co-founder Krista, who's also my wife, and we were sitting there watching the Murray State and St. Peter's game, and we realized I just grabbed my friend's computer and just started working when we were just supposed to be hanging out, so that in case they beat Murray State, we could make something happen. So long story short, St. Peter's wins. I text our licensing director, our director of partnerships, Tom, to say, hey, can you get us St. Peter's immediately? Normally it's a much longer process to get licensed, but he sent a few texts, sent a few emails. He said he hadn't even left his bed by 7:30 a.m. Sunday morning, and we had the license. We had the designs approved because then Chris and I woke up super early the next day, mocked up 4 shirts, and got them all approved. So it happened really fast.
That is crazy fast. And it's especially crazy fast because St. Peter's athletic department isn't very large. Like, a larger place might have somebody whose their whole job is to do nothing but sponsorships, and they're dedicated. They're sitting at their office while everyone else is athletic departmenting, right? And I know that this is one of the least resourced schools, and your compliance person is also your senior women's administrator, and your marketing person is sometimes painting the soccer field. It seems crazy that you could get somebody on the phone that quickly and also expedite that process. If you can do that, why does this take so long for all the other places?
Well, normally you're supposed to go up and down the ladder through the appropriate channels. And these were the appropriate people, just not the normal order of operations for channels. So, we still simultaneously, while we're going through text this way, we're also going through brand manager with CLC to make sure everything does get approved so we can report royalties properly. So yeah, when it's hot market, which is what we call it in t-shirt land, when you're putting a shirt out, following something immediately, a text or verbal confirmation via email will do a lot of the times to start, but you still have to, run up the chain. But for the most part, it does. I would say for larger Power 5 institutions, there's whole review meetings that pull in way more individuals to give their take on whether XYZ school should license Homefield. And it's just a longer process in general with more red tape at the larger institution you go. It's actually nicer in a lot of ways working with the smaller institutions because it's really just one person making the decision, right? As you know from all the sorts of people you're interacting with on a daily basis in your job. So
all right, that makes sense. Whitney, let me ask you this. Like, one of the things that makes Homefield unique beyond the stuff is you are the rare sentient brand that has a personality and has a voice that people, particularly on social media, respond to or interact with. In this kind of tournament, where one, you are pretty Indiana centric, and now you have to celebrate everybody. How do you go about trying to not play favorites or keep this kind of unified voice, given that you're going to be pulled in a lot of different directions, including maybe places you're not so familiar?
Yeah, honestly, that happened quite a bit already. I think the biggest example I can think of this weekend where I was kind of like, I don't want to upset anyone, is when Miami beat Auburn. We had gone so hard with Auburn's men's basketball, supporting the Peacock. I mean, like, we turned into an Auburn brand for like a month. And so when Miami beats them, it's kind of weird to scream and cheer and stomp on Auburn then at that point. So yeah, there's a lot of times where you have to find ways to weave in and still celebrate both sides, but make sure you're not upsetting someone that you once were celebrating so hard. So we just try to continue to be human, just like you said. How would a human feel about this? How would you treat your friends about this? We kind of handle it the same way. So try to stay true to maybe some schools that we've become close with in recent time, but everybody wants to celebrate their wins at this time of year. So got to find a way to do both.
Do you get complaints from, like, because I mean, if there's a game between two Homefield schools and you are celebrating the victory for one, I mean, like, outside of the greater Indiana extended universe, where I could see a complaint, but would you get like a fan or somebody going, I don't think you're properly representing the USC brand right now, or like, is that a thing?
I think we try to avoid them.
Okay.
I think we do a good job avoiding them, but as anything online goes, the bigger you get, the more comfortable people feel, letting you know how they feel about you. So, but we try to make sure we avoid those moments if we can.
Has there been anybody? I noticed Don Staley was rocking the Homefield. Candace Parker's been out. Has there ever been anybody that surprised you? That's like, I didn't know they bought some Homefield.
Well, both of them were pretty big. I was in the middle of trivia last night, trying to pay attention to playing trivia, and then Don Staley's in a hoodie, and I just completely checked out from trivia. I was like, sorry guys, I can't pay attention to you right now. Actually, the one that was a big surprise, we actually sent stuff to Candace and Dawn. Now, there wasn't any agreement that they were going to wear them at all. It was friendly. We had connections with them. We sent it. If they want to wear it, they can. If not, no big deal. So those were actually pretty huge surprises in that they actually did wear them. Candace wore it to homecoming, which was wild, where she was honored and put in like the Hall of Fame in Tennessee, and she's got a Homefield sweatshirt on. That was pretty crazy. But the one we had no idea about was Robin Lopez a couple weeks ago. He showed up in an Instagram video with like every mascot in the NBA, and he's wearing a Tulane shirt. Or no, he's wearing a UC Irvine shirt, UC Irvine. And we had no idea. Looked it up. He had actually purchased like a ton of stuff. We had no idea. So
that feels pretty.
That
Robin
was pretty
Lopez.
cool. Yeah, I know. It's like it felt pretty cool that like Robin Lopez fighting mascots in Homefield felt pretty on brand.
Have you ever seen, has this popped up in non-sport settings? Have you seen like a musician or like an actor or anybody else rocking one of these?
One, just to clarify, a 7'1", very in shape person can wear a 2X for Homefield, we learned.
He looked great in it.
It didn't look super tight at all. Didn't flood him. It was great. I think the non-sports sector, I haven't seen them wear it publicly. The name just came across one day and just kind of shocked me. They've ordered multiple times. It's actually Bill Burr, for whatever reason, the comedian. So that was one that caught my eye. I'm sure there have been people. I mean, we've seen people who order under, if they're like an agent for someone, people have contacted us before. And if they're ordering in the agent's name, I'm not going to say their name publicly, right? But they'll order under their agent's name, and then the agent will send us an email and say, it's actually for this person. Just please don't tell. So haven't seen them wear it publicly yet, but I mean, you know, there's a lot of days out of the year, and there's 1 or 2 t-shirts, so gotta rotate them. But yeah, Bill Burr was a fun one.
I can't even imagine what would go through your head. Like, I mean, like I'm such a baby that if I see somebody retweet something that I wrote or engaged with it in a positive way that's like outside of my own little sphere of like the college sports internet, you know, that I'll be good the entire day. Like I it's been a year. I can remember the time that John Legend like tweeted some Ohio State thing that I put out, right? To see like then like an article of clothing that you produced and folded and shipped, and then there's Robin Lopez. Like I imagine that has to be a rush that's different from producing content or doing any of the other things that you've done. It's more personal than another consumer packaged good, right?
I'd say so. I mean, Whitney, you and I were just talking about this. What actually impacts me more is when I'm just walking my dog and I see someone, a random person who I have no idea who their name is, and it happened to me the other day, just wearing an IU shirt in my neighborhood. And I'm like, that's very, or like people who order that live on my street. Every once in a while, I don't know why, I'll just type in my street name into Shopify and be like, I wonder if any of my neighbors have bought. I'm like, oh, wow, that's weird because they don't know what I do. And that is way more impact. I mean, some know what I do, but I'm not going around being like, hey, nice shirt, I'm the Homefield guy. So that to me is way more impactful.
Has that happened to you too, Whitney?
Yeah, I feel like for Connor, probably as starting this brand, I'm sure it hits him differently. The ones that I send out that pan out feel pretty good for me because you know, that's part of my job is marketing, and so those feel pretty good. But I did see I was in San Diego a couple weeks ago, and the same sweatshirt that Don Staley had on yesterday, someone just walked past me in it, and I was like, like it's that awkward moment of like, can I say something to you, or this is weird? But yeah, it's a crazy feeling to be out somewhere and realize that our little t-shirt brand is kind of big.
It's like the song that went from college radio to mainstream, and now you're hearing it in CVS's, and it's exciting. Let me ask you something a little bit different. So one of the challenges that we talk a lot about in our world is, if you're a school that unexpectedly finds yourself in the spotlight, how can you best take advantage of that? And I guess if you're a smaller school, maybe the licensing process to work with somebody like you is much quicker. I'm wondering, just based on your experience, would you have any advice for an athletic department that is, normally has one reach and suddenly finds themselves with a much larger reach? What are things they should even be thinking about besides calling you to reach people in a different way with their brand?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one thing, I guess, I'm going to tie it back to us a little bit, but and maybe this could apply to other brands as well as they're having this moment. But I think having trust in the brands that you're working with. So I guess, picking brands that you trust, but then trusting them to do whatever their thing is. And for us, that's to get super involved with the brand, make people love the school, even if they've never heard of them. Like, we ride so hard for every school that we have. And we try to make the absolute best designs and options for every school. Like we try to go so hard for everyone. And so, in our case, if you're in that position, like, we promise that we will do we will make you look the best that we possibly can and get people to fall in love with you that maybe didn't already. And so, and that could possibly apply to other brands as well, trying to be as native to whatever that brand is and letting them tell their customers or their fans or their followers in their own way, like, why you should love this school or team or whatever it may be.
Yeah, I think you're right in that, Whitney. I think, I'm always looking at it from a t-shirt angle, but I think there's things you can extrapolate from it. And I think actually St. Peter's has done a good job of this, is leaning into the moment. So, you know, there's a ton of what we would call on the marketing side, user-generated content out there surrounding St. Peter's right now. And of course, Eater, that one guy with a mustache. And, you know, a lot of places maybe we'd be like, oh, does retweeting this fit within our brand guidelines? Is this a little too silly? You know, our voice is supposed to be more such and such. And I think St. Peter's has done a good job of, you know, we have a shirt that says Strut of Destiny on it, and they let us put the phrase Strut of Destiny, and then they're retweeting it, right? I obviously like that because it helps the company I work at. But beyond that, I think, you know, people be like, Strut of Destiny, that seems a little too, maybe it's a little too silly or out there or whatever. And I think they've done a good job of recognizing, you know, they have a peacock as a mascot, and this is a highly unusual thing, and you kind of got to strike while the iron is hot. So, you know, I don't think they've abandoned any core brand values as an athletic department. In fact, I think they've been really fun, and they've, you know, embraced the moment, and that it is, you know, it's possibly, hopefully for them, it's not, you know, once in a lifetime kind of experience, but I think they're doing a good job of capitalizing on what they have in front of them when there's already so much more momentum just to keep it going. So that's an easy, I'm just gave a bunch of advice and generalities of, you know, lean into it and keep it going and all that. But I do think there is something to just embracing really something we try to do, at least with Homefield, with, you know, people will make memes of our shirts, and maybe like some other brands wouldn't like to retweet it because the shirts will maybe be altered in some way and that goes against brand guidelines or the voice doesn't fit. And I just think embracing people, honestly, and what they're saying at the moment, so long as it's not, you know, horribly salacious or mean, builds a connection with people that they'll remember. It won't be like, oh, what was the team that won a few years ago? It's, oh yeah, St. Peter's. Or people remember UMBC because their Twitter account was so active and just, you know, really embraced what others were doing in terms of user generated content.
When you go to talk to school, and just to interrupt, Matt, when you go to talk to schools, do you find like they are not even aware of ultimately what they kind of have in that back catalog? Because I mean, just this week, Vanderbilt rebranded for like the 7th time in like the last 30 years. They had some cool designs back in the day, but like I don't feel like that they've used them at all. Obviously, that they've gone away from a lot of what has made them unique recently. But do you kind of, when you're talking with schools, do you find like they have this awesome logo and they're just not using it?
Yeah, it's kind of one of two things. One, they either don't know, or two, they just don't think people want it. You know, when there's been some schools we've really had to warm up to the idea of like, hey, this old timey version of your mascot playing this sport will actually sell very well. Because frankly, there haven't been many brands that have tried to do what we do. And you have to put yourself in the shoes of a licensing director or someone who works as an assistant AD of marketing. When it comes to licensing, 95% of your job is making sure a student group doesn't do this with your logo, that people are paying royalties, that you're not doing too many free t-shirt giveaways because then the students won't buy shirts, then your royalties will decrease, that people are following corporate social responsibility standards. There's a whole host of things they have. And so from the outside, I think people think in terms of brands. You know, why don't you have a cool brand making it with these cool designs? But an LD's job is so much so focused on royalties and compliance and corporate social responsibility, working with athletics, yada, 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 making sure just the registration marks are placed properly. That, you know, we're such a the fun brand. I think before we arrived, there were other brands doing it, but I think what we're doing is such a small percentage of their brain. So they're like, well, why would I care about that old logo? I have so many of these other responsibilities, and who knows if it'll even sell. I did have one school tell me, well, our basic primary logo is the best selling thing, so I'm only going to really approve that. And I was like, well, if you don't approve other things, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. But most of the time, people are pretty reasonable. They just have so many other responsibilities to keep track of that. They may be like, oh yeah, we know of that logo, but they're so focused on keeping people within brand guidelines or that it's not misused. And so we kind of have to show in a lot of ways that, hey, you can trust us to use it well. Look what we've done with other schools. And also the sales and royalties follow that too. And so, it took a few schools taking some chances on us. And then, Auburn's a great example. We do a lot of stuff with Auburn, and frankly, it's because their licensing department, they're great people who gave us a chance very early on when they shouldn't have. And so they let us, not when they shouldn't have, but, when we were much smaller.
Yeah. The first SEC school I think that you worked with, it was one of the really big outside of the Midwest names.
Yes. We have 30 plus people that work at Homefield now. They approved us when there was just 5 of us. And so, we went off art sheet is what we call it. And then shoot, it's called, with a lot of our designs, and they trusted that we were going to tell the story well and that we have a quality product. And, it sold extremely well. It was our best day ever. And then we're able to take that to other schools and say, hey, look at this case study we have with Auburn, an SEC school. We could do the same with you guys.
So I've been writing some of these things down over the course of this conversation, and mostly because I am not in the big t-shirt biz. So I do not know what a hot market or an art sheet was. Part of this podcast is deciphering the jargon of the other rabbit holes throughout college athletics. If you want to sound really impressive at the next party that you're at with a bunch of people that work in licensed apparel, what are some other industry terms that they should be able to know and or use correctly in a sentence to impress people and show that they are serious professionals?
Oh man. So, Tom would have been great to help with this one. Tom is our director of partnerships. He used to work at CLC and formerly before that Learfield Licensing and SMA. LD is a good one. Licensing director, of course. It makes me think of Larry David, though, from that's what he calls himself on Curb. Gosh. So I already said, what did I said hot market. I said LD.
And going off art sheet.
Going off art sheet, yeah, that's a big one. A lot of registration mark talk. Shoot, I just had another one. I was at the ICLA, Intercollegiate Licensing Association conference down in Louisville a few weeks ago, and so this should be fresh on the brain for me. Oh man, just a lot of compliance talk, a lot of corporate social responsibility talk.
Very important.
No, it's extremely important. Corporate social responsibility. You got to make sure that you're not employing unfair labor practices, the way your garments are created. Brand manager is a big one. If you ever work with CLC, that's their platform. Just real inside baseball, like names of software. Brand comply, that's another software. Just really, if anybody listens to this that's working in licensing, they're just rolling their eyes at me right now because I'm saying very basic things for licensing, but you're getting to learn software.
There you go. If you are a licensing director and you're listening to this show and you're screaming right now into your car, my email is matt@extrapointsmb.com. Feel free to dictate your missive to me and I will send it to Connor later and we can all laugh at the fact that he's forgotten something very important.
Oh, incremental sales is a huge one. Incremental sales. You don't want to be just taking somebody else's slice of the pie. You want to show you're growing the pie. That's a big one that drives a lot of talk is incremental sales. It's true. I mean, it's good. I probably heard it. I've probably said the phrase incremental sales, I would say 1,000 times in the last 3.5 years of my life. So that's a massive one.
There we go. So that means by listening to this show this far into it, you have earned 3 credit hours towards your MBA at the University of Indiana School of Business. Please don't.
You gotta be careful. Indiana University, that'll get you.
Indiana University of Pennsylvania.
Well, no, IU, Indiana University in Bloomington is Indiana University, not University of Indiana. That'll get you. That'll get you ratioed on Twitter, my friend.
Okay, well, I mean, it wouldn't be the first time that IU Twitter has ratioed me. or that employees of that fine institution. I'm sorry.
Go Hoosiers.
Go Hoosiers. Bryan, did you have any other questions real quick? Because if you didn't, I do feel like it might make a good, it should be a good segue for us to do an ad read, but I don't want to talk over you if you had any other important questions.
The only thing that I was just thinking of just going through this process is we talked a little bit about that short turnaround with St. Peter's, but I'm curious, let's say it's a normal Big Noon Saturday launch or whatever, and you're focused, you got one school from that design, whether it's Photoshop. I'm curious to kind of find out what your process is from a design of a shirt to printing to getting shipped to my door. Like, walk us through that and how long it ultimately can take some kind of an image in your head to it's actually delivered to my door.
Yeah, Whitney, I can handle the production and conception side there if you want to handle the marketing. So I would say 4 to 6 month timeline for a Big News Saturday. So for those who aren't aware, when we do this campaign launching a brand new school collection, 15 pieces roughly. And it's in this campaign called Big News Saturday. So during Big News Saturday season, in consecutive weeks, we'll launch a school at noon Eastern each Saturday. It's this massive collection. It's a party all week online for that school. But you pretty much have to back up 4 to 6 months before the school is launched to be a Big New Saturday for us to begin the process. So our team's doing it right now for a few schools. If you add up in your head, you can figure out probably when Big News Saturday season 4 falls. But essentially, a design team does a ton of research beforehand. They talk to the school. This is post approval. We'll reach out to the school about 6 months before we want to launch them to say, hey, do we have approval? And just let them know who we are. Just say, hey, we do this kind of stuff. So we would hate, because what we don't want to do is get approval and then we go off art sheet, and then they're like, wait a minute, I thought you were just using our College Vault logos. It's like, well, yes, but also some others. So we want to make sure they're cool with what we do before we launch them. And then, design they'll basically do a school every week to 2 weeks. They'll just I'll walk by the conference room and they've got on the TV just like ton of different designs or old magazines, newspapers, all those clippings projected up there for the schools, and they just start going through concepts for each school. So they'll do that, and then it it gets approved and it lies dormant for a while, and then we'll do a big production run probably a month before launch of every single product, so it can be ready for launch, because it's such a concentrated event when we do launch. So it starts 4 to 6 months out on the talking with schools and design side. Then we kind of take a break, and then it goes into actually launching it, which Whitney is the absolute best person to talk about that.
Yeah, so we about a month out is when we'll even announce the Big New Saturday is coming. So we even start marketing the idea of it a whole month ahead of time. But also within that, with every school that we launch, even outside of Big New Saturday, but definitely for Big New Saturday, we research as hard as we can and find every blogger, podcast, any person that's remotely affiliated with that school, and see if they will work with us in terms of promotion. And so we're looking for everybody. If you're a Twitter account with 3,000 followers and those 3,000 people are there for Minnesota sports, then that is the perfect person for us. So I'll do a whole set of research and just find these people first. And then it starts the reach out process, get a hold of everybody, talk to them, explain what we're doing. Start to, if we're lucky, they know about Homefield. That makes the job really easy. If they don't, then we got to explain who we are, explain why we think this will be a great partnership. And so we're doing that, for, 15 or 16 schools times, it could be 5 or 6 partners per. So it's a pretty massive task to take on. And then you manage those all the way through. You're working with people every week, in and out, getting the launch ready, getting the excitement built up. Luckily for me, the design team, as Connor was explaining, does some of the best research you could ever imagine. And then they put it in a document that I can literally just go into and then go nuts on Twitter with, things that related to the school. So that is an incredible sort of little bit of a handoff there. That's great for me. And then we celebrate as hard as we can for a week with that school, and then we're on to the next one. But I think what's really cool within that too is we learned so much about a school getting ready for the launch that then we're like sort of part of that school as it goes on. So what we really want to make sure and do in all these launches is we don't just launch a school and move on to the next and never think about them again. So we really try to make sure that anytime a school is having any sort of success or whatever it may be, like we continue to celebrate and be a part of that once they're on our site. So it's a pretty massive process, especially when you've got so many schools lined up in a row for so long.
The whole concept of the Big News Saturday as seasons, creating basically a season, like a schedule out of thin air to give people something to look forward to and count down to is unique. It breaks up the calendar. It's kind of cool. We've talked about this before. The last Big News Saturday season was very college basketball focused. It had some absolute bangers. I don't mind. We've said this on the air a couple of times. I dropped $100 on UCLA week. I have never been to UCLA's campus. I have only very tenuous family ties to that institution. Adorable bears with roses and playing basketball without those color schemes is great. I love the NC State Creamery shirt and some of the weird wolf stuff that we had there. They had cool stuff for Cincinnati. They had cool stuff for Gonzaga. What am I missing here? There's Illinois. Yeah, I bought an Illinois thing here too because this is where I live now. And you heard it here. You heard it here first, folks. Using my powers of deduction as a serious professional journalist, I do believe Connor did confirm that there will be a Big News Saturday season 4. Is that right?
I did. Yes, you had a way to really just uncover that right there. That's reporting. First heard on the Going for Two podcast.
That's right. That's why you pay $8 a month to support this entire enterprise here, folks.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't suppose I could get either of you to tease one of the institutions that may or may not be participating in this, beyond the fact that we could just say we can look at a list of P5 schools and you don't have to be Encyclopedia Brown to figure out which ones aren't on there, right?
For the most part, there are a couple of holdouts for one reason or another. But you could probably quickly figure out who's going to be in Big News Saturday season 4.
Let me just say this, friends. I am excited about Big News season 4. And for a multitude of reasons. You can get, if you've been listening to this entire thing for the past 35 minutes, like, one, God bless you. Two, you can save 15% off your order at using promo code extra points at homefieldapparel.com. The last thing I'll mention, just because we have everybody on here, the cool thing is I know since I've been explicitly mentioning this over the last 2 episodes, I am aware of multiple FCS and 1AAA mid-major programs that have said, Matt, like water dripping on concrete, you've broken me down. I'm ready. Give me Connor's information so we can sign up. So if I haven't managed to do this yet and you haven't signed up and you're not one of these behemoths that has to get the whole UN Security Council to approve any kind of like licensing deal or something, my email is matt@extrapointsmb.com. I will introduce you to people here, or we can go get your weird vintage 1930s brand involved here so people can buy their t-shirts. There's no reason to let St. Peter's have all the fun. You don't have to make the Sweet 16 to get your shirts on this company. Colorado School of Mines hasn't made the Sweet 16 yet. You can buy Mine shirt.
The Mine? Yeah, they're great. They're very fun to interact with on Twitter, and Blaster is an amazing mascot. So we love the Colorado School of Mines.
We do. I'm wearing a Delaware shirt right now. I don't think Delaware's made the Sweet 16, right? No.
Biden had them both going to the final game and winning. So the Blue Hens in his bracket.
Friends, thank you both for taking some time here to chat with us. I know you're both very busy. It's great to catch up with both of you. And of course, thank you for supporting Going for Two.
Of course. Thanks for having us, guys. We really appreciate it. Love Going for Two. I frequently listen. I do have to say this while on the air. I keep meaning to tell you, Matt, I was at a wedding for Tom, our director of partnerships, and I saw some CLC people there, and I overheard the phrase, "Yeah, I got foiled by Matt Brown" at my table. So I just want you to know, even in licensing, you may get foiled by Matt Brown.
You might listen. I think they all have to to the friends and colleagues with the CLC. I'll tell you what, I won't foil you if you just CC me on all your emails about the EA Sports video game. The stuff. I mean, I'm not publishing any of the sponsorship things for your other T-shirts. That's all I wanted to know. So again, my email, matt@extrapointsnb.com. I am aware. I have both made friends in that organization, and there are some people that I don't think will become Extra Point subscribers. But it wasn't personal. I'm just trying to do my job.
I advocated on your behalf and said, Matt is a great guy. He's just very good at his job. So, and that seemed to be a satisfactory answer.
Well,
you're an expert marketer. You just came up with a new slogan for the podcast, "Foiled by Mac Brown."
There you go.
Yeah, honestly, so good.
That should be the next like Extra Point shirt. It should just be like something with a bunch of redactions on it, right? Like that'd be
a bunch of black boxes, like 4 words.
Sorry for ruining the wedding with my paperwork. Thanks again, friends. I'm sure we'll do it again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Always fun to spend some time with both of them. Whitney was a great colleague. I'm glad that she's landed somewhere where she can be successful, and I'm glad that Homefield's been successful. And not just successful so they can give us money, but because they're our friends. This isn't really about selling shirts, but I assume you did see it is about selling stuff. You did see the big Adidas NIL announcement earlier this week, right, Bryan?
I did, and I think that was one of the more eye-opening news stories. Certainly, when you look at kind of our most read stories that we get through the D1 ticker, that generated a lot of interest, a lot of talk on Twitter and social media, as well as kind of industry reaction to how this is structured. I know there was a couple of compliance folks that I said, we're asking a lot of questions about how this is going to be structured. Ultimately, what ends up going to the student athlete. Is it kind of just your typical thing that you might see in terms of a normal retailer that Amazon has these type of programs and whatnot? Is it something similar to that, but only for Adidas people? There were, a lot of questions surrounding this Adidas NIL deal, not the least of which the fact that it's not until 2023. So there is a long time before it actually launches, which was, I think, the most interesting thing, at least in my standpoint, is it's going to take a while to ramp this up. Yeah.
Just like I learned this as a solo operator in the beginning of the name, image, and likeness world. And I think, and this is honestly something I still would like to do, and I've taken meetings, and I'm looking for the best logistical way to do it. To have a campus ambassador program to promote Extra Points. People that are familiar with like the media world know that this was part of the secret sauce that led Morning Brew to become a newsletter behemoth. Other digital entities have done this as well, but setting up with a big spreadsheet and then trying to follow up with people and manage those. Even when I had 7 or 8 NIL deals going at a time, it was a lot. Especially because I was also the marketing director for Extra Points and the copy editor and the technical support specialist and the editor. It was a lot for one guy. Didn't do all those things very well. That's why I sold the D1 ticker, so I can have someone to help with those. And my reading from this program was that it really did just seem like that on steroids. And maybe that there's some capacity to use current athletes in other larger Adidas marketing campaigns if they already have the rights to those by opting them in. And so maybe for a small handful of people, that might mean significantly more money. But if it's just opt into this and you get 20% back on people buying stuff at adidas.com with your coupon code, I don't know if that's revolutionary. I mean, it's smart. You're going to get a ton of positive PR, as long as none of those people covered the FBI trial. But I don't know if that is necessarily changing the NIL paradigm. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, you mentioned the FBI trial right there. That was the first thing I know. A lot of media members in particular were kind of saying, well, look, Book Richardson, a few of these other, people are literally in prison right now for some of the same things that Adidas just announced they're essentially going to do in terms of paying players to go to certain schools, essentially because you have to be at an Adidas school as part of this program. And that's, I think, where some of the thorny issues definitely come up. It is interesting to see how quickly the space is changing. My initial reaction too was, because there's such a long lead up time, I'm very curious to see what Under Armour is going to do, what Nike in particular is going to do, because we don't have enough details in terms of the actual execution. I think some of those other organizations, and it's not just those companies, your Cokes, your Pepsis, and whatnot, that always have relationships with a lot of these schools as well. Maybe they're thinking, hey, we can get into this game. We can have an affiliate program like you're saying, or maybe they can kind of go even above and beyond that. And so I think it's again, the space is changing so rapidly. I think that has to be kept in mind. We're right at coming off the backs of that 8 million NIL collective story and a recruit possibly going to Tennessee as a result. Now we have this story with Adidas. Like, it's just wild. It seems like every single week, either collectives or kind of that NIL space is making waves in college athletics. And it's only March. We're kind of really at the beginning of the calendar. We're at the tail end here of kind of basketball season, obviously. I would imagine coming into the summer where teams and marketers and all that have had a full year to kind of prepare for things that they can launch. I would imagine we're going to get a lot more things that are going to happen over the next 6 or so months before football season starts and before the next really semester starts for a lot of these schools, to where we could see even more crazy things happen.
I'm planning on spending maybe most of next week, honestly, before I go to New Orleans, writing about NIL. Just like we spent a lot of this week writing about St. Peter's and mid-majors. And maybe, I don't know if that's something we'll do forever, but there's so many other stories kind of converging upon this particular point that I think I want to spend some more time targeted in that world. Your idea here about maybe this is something that Coke jumps into is interesting to me. I had a similar thought, and I was just talking to an NIL industry expert about this for Connect today. I think that will go out next week. That there is kind of unexplored territory for these brands that have gigantic athletic department-wide contracts. If you're in the MMR space, if you're an athletic apparel, pouring rights, there's a couple other ones outside of like the Learfield Van Wagner world, where it isn't totally clear what you can or should be doing with NIL. Potentially there's a way for everybody to make more money if you add components to that within your contract with the school itself. And I don't know if there's technical barriers or legal barriers or logistical ones to make that happen, but it seems like that might be more efficient. So maybe that's like the game-changing thing. I appreciate that this is open for men and women. If it really is just we're going to pay you $150 base plus sales, for blah, 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 it's going to mean a lot of people are going to sell 2 or 3 shoes and a handful of people will do more. And you know what, though? That's still cool. Like, if a deal with that where you might make $200 and get a free pair of shoes when you're 20 is not nothing, especially if you're playing for, I don't know, some SoCon team where you're not making the NCAA tournament and people typically aren't beating down your door anyway. So I don't know. I guess the last thing that kind of came to my mind thinking about this is we are heading into a cycle where I think a couple of big college brands are likely to test free agency waters in the collegiate apparel space. Maybe not this summer or next, but in the next next year and a half. I've been told LSU might be one of those. Penn State might be one of those. Notre Dame might be one of those. There's a couple other ones. If you were a company that was maybe thinking of trying to chase some of that business or retain some of that business, maybe this is a good PR thing to leak with a long runway to put some pressure on those other brands ahead of time. I don't know exactly what the end game is or how this all fits together. I would assume Nike and I would assume Under Armour will follow suit in some capacity. But I, like with everything, I don't think this is entirely just out of the goodness of their hearts trying to expand economic opportunities to college basketball players. There's an angle, not entirely sure what it is yet.
Well, and you got to understand that these are massive multinational companies, right? Like they're not just jumping into the waters because of some back of the napkin math. Maybe possibly might make sense in terms of a branding or marketing opportunity. No, they've gone down, I'm sure, with their accountants and their lawyers to say, we can actually make a profit off of this enterprise, and so like that to me is probably the more interesting aspect of things. We kind of said it when NIL started. We thought it's going to be a lot more kind of smaller entities, certainly more local, certainly even connections with your school already, or boosters that have businesses in the local community. And we were still kind of thinking that the big brands, we're going to wait a while, kind of see how things will play out. Now we're starting to see maybe they have seen some kind of numbers. Here I would love to certainly have somebody from Adidas, kind of walk us through in terms of how they think this is going to go from a number standpoint, because obviously they've got to make a return to shareholders, and at the end of the day, throwing a bunch of money at these athletes, it's got to make sense financially for them, and obviously they think it does, and in a lot of respects. So I'm curious to see what they're going to do, what others are going to do, not just to copy them, but potentially one up them, and so. Away we go. This is that now that the big brands are going to start to enter the space, even more changes is going to hit NIL, and I'm very curious. I mean, you're already seeing Buffalo Wild Wings do March Madness activations for NIL, and some of the stars of the NCAA tournament. Where I think that is going to continue, obviously, especially as the eyeballs kind of come into focus in particular. And I think again, now that we're seeing the bigger brands dip their toes into the water, who's going to be creative, and ultimately how do they see the ROI? How do they see the returns? How do they make sure that it makes sense financially for them? Because that is kind of the great unknown. It's one thing if you're a booster and you can say, if I lose $1 million on an NIL deal, but it gets us 2 5-star recruits, I'm totally fine with that. It's a whole different thing if you're a public company or you're one of these Adidas companies that are involved with these big businesses. That's
exactly the thing. As funny as it would be for Tim Cook to decide, actually, we're going to move a division for Apple, solely to pump up our Auburn recruits and to screw Alabama. That would be hilarious. But Apple's not going to do that. Their investors,
Alabama fans buy iPhones too.
That's true. That's true. If you are a publicly traded company, or even if you're privately held and you have a lot of internal investors and lots of paperwork, you can't get away with that. It's different if you are maybe the president of an HVAC concern across 4 states and you hold everything and you want to siphon off money to do it that way. Buffalo Wild Wings isn't going to do that, and they're going to get into the space. You can get away with it being a loss leader in the beginning for some positive PR and some halo effect and participating. And here's the guy with the mustache. You can't get away with that forever. So I don't know to what tail is going to wag what dog as we go through all of this. I don't know. I'm going to make a bunch of phone calls and write about it the best that I can, but I'm not an expert. And if someone says that they are, they're probably selling you something, because we're all figuring this out.
Exactly. And I think the interesting thing too, that you could also kind of say this might be an inflection point in the industry. We've talked about it. There's so many companies that have popped up in this space. We know there's going to be some sort of consolidation coming. Yep. Maybe the fact that big brands like Adidas, kind of signaling that they are jumping into this space is enough for other larger companies to get involved. I've mentioned some agencies like CA and whatnot. Certainly there's some tricky issues around some of those companies, but are they looking at buying a Teamworks, an Influencer, any number of various companies that are kind of involved or surrounding this space? Maybe it starts off an M&A spree, just in the NIL spree. That to me could be interesting now that big brands have signaled, hey, we're going to get involved in these college athletes as well because it makes sense for us financially. I'm guessing some investors out there, some private equity firms, some enterprising big agencies might say, you know what, well, maybe it's time for us to start gobbling up a few companies and trying to lay some bets on the field as well.
I've said this. I don't know if I said this in print yet. I think I probably have, but if I haven't said it on the air, like, this is where I think the collective game ends. If these things actually are sustainable enterprises, and I'm not willing to say that I know that yet. I know there's going to be a rush to start these things. We'll see how many of them stay after a year and a half. But if you can actually reliably fundraise and turn a modest profit and do this reliably, I think Learfield is going to buy a bunch of them, or Fanatics is going to buy a bunch of them, or ESPN, or the schools. And there'll be an M&A merger brush in that space. I don't think it's going to happen tomorrow. But the conference realignment within the MAC and the America East and the Southland are not going to be the only major realignment changes within the college athletics world in the next couple of months. That feels like a good place to get us out on, especially because multiple sources are telling me that something called a North Macedonia just beat Italy in the soccer match. I feel like that deserves our attention. So thank you so much for following along with us here this week. It was just a good mid-major week here across Collegiate Sports Connect. It was a great mid-major week on Extra Points. We are going to have a bunch of NIL stories across both platforms next week, and then I'm going to head off to New Orleans. So I don't know, maybe we'll let Penny do one of these, one of the newsletters, I think, while I'm gone, so I can go run into everybody. So if you're going to be in New Orleans, let me know. Shoot me a DM, shoot me a text, shoot me an email, matt@extrapointsnb.com. Evan, Bryan, have I forgotten to plug anything?
No, just make sure you've already signed up for D1 Ticker. You can follow all the latest stories in college athletics, plus, of course, signing up for Extra Points.
That's right, my friends. Thank you for sticking with us this week. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the bouncy hoops. Catch up with you next week.